this is Debbie Lynn Toomey, Tufts Medical Center's Injury Prevention Coordinator, and this is Aging Strong. This is an injury prevention and outreach program that aims to empower older adults. Today's topic is on death. In particular, I have somebody who can talk about death in a really graceful and interesting way. She is a death doula. Her name is Amy Yonick. And for all of us out there, we all know that, death is a part of living. And so today I'm very excited to learn from Amy to find out how we could have really useful conversation and respectful conversation around the topic of death and dying. So Amy, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to be on your show.
Mm-hmm. So Amy, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this line of work, which is very interesting?
Very unexpectedly. This is not something that I had anticipated. Many of my colleagues saw this pathway coming for a long time. I've been a coach for my entire adult life. I've worked with mostly women. I've been a health and fitness coach. I was a life coach. I've worked in the fitness and nutrition industry. I was a private cook. I took orders from busy families and created healthy meals and delivered them. And when COVID hit and everybody was sent home from their busy jobs, everybody started cooking. So I kind of fell out of business. And I spent some time wondering what was next for me. And in that curiosity, I looked into volunteering. And I found an opportunity to become a hospice volunteer near me. And it was not something that I said, yeah, I think I'd like to do that. It was more of a, hey, go do that. So I became a hospice volunteer, and it became some of the most inspiring work I had ever done. About 4 or 5 months into that work, my husband and I went on vacation, and I went off to take a look for a book to read on the beach. And I came upon a novel, and the main character was a death doula. And again, hey, do that. What is this? What is a death doula? And on vacation, I did my research. I found a place to get certified. That was in December 21. All of 22, I did my certification, became a certified conscious dying coach, a sacred passage death doula, and then went on to become an end-of-life educator. And it just is feeling like all the arrows have been leading me to this place.
Wow. It's really interesting trying to connect the dots of your experiences. So it seems like you're an overarching mission, please correct me if I'm wrong, is to really support people wherever they're at in their life. Whether it's nutrition in their life, maybe business, or exploring the best version of themselves, and then, end of life, another part of life, which is really interesting, very, very fascinating, because I've heard of birth doulas, mm-hmm. and which is very amazing as well, but to have it in the other end of the spectrum is very fascinating. And just learning a little bit about it, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, coaching has definitely been the thread throughout all of my businesses. And for me, it's having somebody who sees you maybe in a way that you haven't yet been able to see yourself as, your highest potential. And as it relates to end of life, my goal is to help people first initiate these conversations because they're very important conversations. Second is to see themselves being an active participant in what their end of life journey looks like. I think we're so afraid of having this conversation that we don't even consider planning for it. We plan for graduation, wedding, anniversaries, everything, all these occasions that we want to celebrate, we plan well in advance. But for the thing that we all know we're going to face, very little planning goes into it. So if I can help people get very clear about what they want that end of life experience to look like as best they can, because like you mentioned in a birthing doula, you can have the best birth plan ever. And nature just says, nope, we're going to go this way. Same thing can happen at the end of life. But if you do have a plan in place and you have shared what your wishes are with your loved ones, then the chances of it happening the way you want it to, or at least closer than, what may not have happened if you not had planned, the chances are much higher.
Mm.
And what I help people do is to ask the hard questions, to dig in, become reflective in different areas of their life so that they can explore, what do I want? What is most important to me as I get to that end of my life?
Yeah, lovely, lovely. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking, having that respectful space for a conversation, a safe space for conversation, and also giving us that person who is dying, a sense of control, because, they could be dying because of age. We can't control age. They could be dying because of a malignancy. We can't control that. But, focusing on what a person can control is so important.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I ask people questions like, what kind of comfort care would you like at the end of life? And sometimes people just think it's this big, overwhelming question, but it really comes down to the very specifics. I'll give myself for an example. I like really soft material. So at the end of my life, I want to be in very soft, cozy pajamas or nightgown. I want cozy blankets on top of me. I don't like my feet to be too hot or too cold. So loved ones, please test them out. There are very specific things, like there are scents that I don't like, and scents that bring me, a lot of joy and bring back a lot of memories. I love the ocean. If I can't be at the ocean at some point, I'd like to hear the ocean. So just exploring what some of these desires are and what might bring you comfort care at the end of your life when maybe you can't speak for yourself. So exploring this and telling your loved ones what these things are, then they feel this sense of purpose during a time of your life when they feel helpless. There's nothing they can do. But if they understand these desires, then they have that purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about one of a close relative who, when he passed with his wife at the bedside, one of his children, and a priest. And as the priest was finishing up the prayer, that's when he took his last breath. And I couldn't help but say, and I was really surprised when I said it myself, that was a beautiful death. That was a beautiful death, because it was with grace, with blessings and prayers, in the comfort of his own home, surrounded by people who he loved. And he was able to, I in my heart felt like he was able to transition with grace. And so as you're talking about yourself, I think I would love the same for me, to be surrounded by people that I love, and so, that's what I would wish for people out there, my future, my patients that I've taken care of. So, yeah.
And also educating caregivers on what they can expect at the end of life. Mm-hmm. We, go back 100 years and we were living in multi-generational homes where it was more common that a grandparent or great-grandparent would die at home, and the kids would be present and the conversation would be present as well. And death wasn't so not understood. And now where, first of all, we avoid the conversation. People might think it's contagious if you talk about death. But the first thing people think is, quick, let's get the body off to the morgue or get it to the funeral home. But being present during those final moments and understanding that this is a very normal process, but also understanding leading up to that moment, what might happen. Like, it's scary to hear a death rattle. People might think their loved one is choking, but to understand what's really happening when their loved one decides that, they stop receiving food, don't force them, offer it to them. But when they get to that point where they don't want it anymore, that's a sign. They're going through a transition. They're going through the labor of death. So educating the family and the caregivers on what can be expected can make the experience for the caregivers much more peaceful. So it's not just the individual who's dying who's having that graceful, peaceful experience. It's their loved ones, instead of being traumatized.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So describe to me the role of a death doula, and how would people know when they need one?
So the role of the death doula, first of all, is non-medical. I have no medical training at all. I am purely there as a spiritual, emotional guidance, somebody there to, do you understand what I mean when I say hold space?
I do, but if you could explain it to other people, that would be great.
So I like to picture it as, open arms to whoever is present, and just creating this space of safety and allow for bravery and courage, and allowing for all emotions, because different people are going to respond differently to a loved one dying, and acceptance, non-judgment, and then also education. So helping people understand the process, what's happening here, talking to individuals, the caregivers. And it's a lot of time with the caregivers, and there's time with the person who's dying as well. The caregivers are the ones who are going to be left behind, and they need that love and attention. They need that acceptance for what they're experiencing. So a death doula can help, just like the birth doula helps to usher life in, the death doula helps to usher life out. And then when death has come and your loved one is present and everyone around is maybe thinking about moving, starting, calling, getting things done, a death doula is going to encourage you to stop, to slow down, to allow what happened to start to integrate. One of the most beautiful rituals is an anointing ritual, where the loved ones stand around the vessel and we anoint from head to toe, and we give thanks for every part of their loved one's body and how it had contributed to their life with their loved ones. So starting with their brain and all their thoughts and their eyes and everything they saw, and their mouth and the words of love that they shared, and their arms, the people that they held, and their hands, maybe they were creative in what they created. And we just go through the body. And while we're doing this, the loved ones are standing around, allowing what has happened to sink in. Like, they're stopping. And they're being present to the fact that their loved one is no longer here in the same way that they were moments ago. So the grieving process can actually start in a very gentle and loving way, as opposed to, hurry up, let's make all the phone calls, tell the family. And it just changes the way that they might experience death. And much of the feedback that is heard, like what you said, is, that was a beautiful experience.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I can see how that particular part the anointing, I think is what you called it. It's almost like a personalized celebration of life in a way that's just intimate between the person who passed. I think you call that the body vessel, and also those around that person. That's beautiful. And it's a nice way for them to just pause and take a moment of appreciation. Yeah, that's lovely. I know, well, as a nurse, I've been a nurse for over 30 years in the hospital. When somebody passes, we have to call, admitting, we have to call, all these, there's so many different phone calls. And then there's this and that, because it's a different scenario all around. Whereas if somebody passed in their home, that's totally different. But I can understand how when somebody passes, there's that reactionary time when, okay, what's the next thing we need to do? We have to call this. We have to go through our list, call all these people, make appointments, and, call the morgue or whoever it is. So it is a great time, as you mentioned, to just kind of pause and just kind of take a moment.
And I think it's reactionary to start doing that because, we're wired, we're hardwired to do, right? Because now I feel of use. I feel like I have something to do as opposed to being. And that's another thing that a doula brings to the experience is, there are a lot of things that we can do. We can help you wash your loved one's body. We can help you dress them. But being is what makes a big difference, is how we are being in that moment, in those moments after death, and really allowing the loss to be integrated. We personally, in our family, had a loss in April, and he died in the hospital, in ICU. And I think it's really dependent on the hospital and the staff. We had an amazing experience. When he died, one of the nurses came in and brought whoever was in the room, I think there were 4 or 5 of us, a little vial with his last living heartbeat, like a printout of it with a little ribbon around it. And they said, take as much time as you want. So they allowed for us to take the time to do this anointing ritual. And I think this brings up the importance of healthcare workers being respectful of this time immediately after death and not moving quickly to get the body out. But we had the most wonderful staff of people who respected that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. So as far as knowing if a person needed a doula, is there a time when it's too late? Is there a time that's too early? What's a good time to call somebody to kind of help process the death and dying process?
I mean, in my opinion, I think as soon as you get a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis, I think that is a great time, because the conversations can start at that point, talking about what the individual who has been diagnosed, what their wishes are. And that takes time. It takes time to explore and reflect on your own life and try to figure out what it is that you do want. There are relationships that might need cleaning up. That can take time. There are affairs that, if they're not already in order, need to be brought into order. There are a lot of resources that a death doula can bring to the table that, just the layperson might not be aware of. So as soon as a diagnosis occurs, I would say that is a great time to reach out and find a doula that feels like a fit for you. Many doulas do, just vigil bedside. So when a family member knows that, a loved one is at their final stages, a doula can help, with respite. Caregivers are spending a lot of time at the bedside and they need a break. But they don't want to leave their loved ones for fear of, there's a million reasons why they don't want to leave their loved ones. So having a doula there to share that time at the bedside can help out a caregiver get the rest and rejuvenation that they need to come back and be present again. Also, some of the rituals and talking to the caregivers, again, helping them to understand what's happening with their loved one and giving them someone to talk to. Sometimes talking to people outside of your family can be very therapeutic. Like there aren't all the attachments, all the history, and having somebody who can just say, you're doing okay. You're doing the best that you can. What's going on for you? Because I think caregivers think that everything has to be about the person who's dying. And as caregivers anyway, we're the last ones on the list. So we're always giving. So this is an opportunity for a caregiver to be seen, to be heard, to be able to speak. So it's that spiritual and emotional support and the permission to just be with what's happening, to acknowledge what's happening.
So I didn't know doulas can offer respite services, which is great. So can you explain to the viewers a little bit more about how would that be different from, because some people might think, okay, isn't that what hospice, isn't that what they do? Can you speak a little bit about just the basic delineation between that hospice and, a doula's ability to offer that type of care?
So hospice is spread pretty thin. A lot of people think that once somebody is put on hospice, that means that they have, 24/7 nursing, caregiving, volunteers, but that's not, unfortunately, how it works. Hospice is very thin on their availability to just sit and spend time. As a doula, that's my job, to sit and spend time. So I can provide a whole lot more time for respite and to be with your loved one than a hospice nurse or volunteer can.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. Now, do people, is it just one day that you spend? Does it, how many times would a doula show up for the family? Is it up to the needs of the family? Is it up to, the distance? Are they far away? Do you offer services virtually?
It could be, I would say yes. It could be all of those things. It could be any one of those things. It would be, based on the individual situation, for sure, finding out exactly what the family needs. Oftentimes, when I go to a family, we sit down, we talk about, a plan. And many times it's, a lot of conversation. Sometimes it's via Zoom. Sometimes it's on the phone. Sometimes it's in person. Sometimes it's with the entire family. An important thing to do is to have the family all on the same page. So everybody understands. If we've had the chance, we have the benefit of being able to talk to the individual who is at end of life and understand what their wants and desires are, to be able to communicate those with the entire family so that there's no miscommunication. A lot of times that's what happens with families, is that, brother thinks this, sister thinks that, and aunt thinks something differently. And then, it just creates a lot of confusion and, unfortunately, argument. So everybody gets on the same page. And then we devise a plan that works best for the family. It could be a 3-day vigil when they get to the very end of life, but it's impossible to know when that's going to be.
Yeah.
As you know, there's no way to know.
There's no way to know.
There are signs that definitely say it's close, but there's no way to know. And oftentimes people will, the family's rotating visiting time so that their loved one is never alone, and their loved one just might be waiting to be alone, because that's their choice, is to die alone, and they don't want their family to witness that. So, it's all a very individual situation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm here to serve the family in the way that will best benefit them.
Thank you. As far as this particular type of service, is this something that was just originated in the United States, or is this something that was borrowed from other cultures, different parts of the world?
I think in many different cultures, there are many different ways of doing this. There's I mean, this is, age old, millennia. I mean, people have been taking care of each other at the end of life forever. I mean, I think what we're doing now is we're just coming back into the conversation because we would do this naturally. The word doula is a Greek word that means woman servant. So we look at, the men would be out in the fields and, doing the work outside of the home, and the women would be in the home being of service, helping to birth children and helping to usher life out. So this is centuries old, this kind of work. I think people are just starting to realize that there's some disjointing in the way that we're doing death now. And we're trying to come back to a more simplified and connected way of addressing this inevitable final challenge of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to ask, I know people out there are very fascinated with this topic, and it's definitely a death and dying, and even to add the death doula in the conversation, I'm sure people are going to be asking, is this something that's covered by insurances, or is this something that is out of pocket?
Unfortunately, insurance does not cover something like this right now.
Mm-hmm.
No, unfortunately, there's not even licensing. I know the, End of Life Doula Association is working on that, but there's no licensing for this kind of care or service. There's certification programs, but it's growing. It's an industry. The profession is growing. So I can only imagine that licensing and certification, and eventually, hopefully, it will be something that insurance will cover.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be very, very good. And you also mentioned, for people who are interested in hiring a death doula, for them to hire somebody that they trust or maybe built a rapport. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so I'll just speak to my experience over the years as a life coach. You've got to have that connection. You've got to feel like this is the right person for your family. Different personalities are going to connect. You probably want somebody who would understand your family's culture, if that's something that's very important to you. So I would say, interview people. I can only imagine. I offer a free consultation to be able to talk to a family and see if we feel like a fit. So I think that would be an important thing for someone who's looking to hire a doula, is to interview a couple of people and see who feels like the right fit for you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Can you just go over, are there any more responsibilities that we need to know about as far as what death doulas can offer to people?
May I share my screen now? Would that be a good time?
Great.
Okay, let's do that. This is just from something that I've put together. And these are some of the things. Oh, I did that wrong. My apologies.
Yeah, because I didn't know that they offered respite, that type of
right
thing.
So can you see my screen now?
Yes, definitely.
So these are just some of the things that we do, some of the principles that I learned through my certification. I can go through these, creating a healing environment that includes, the kind of energy that's brought to the room. If there are siblings who are arguing about something, bring it outside. Your loved one who's dying does not need to have that energy around them. They don't need to hear that kind of conversation. Create, if you've had the benefit of having conversations prior to, you understand what a healing environment looks like for your loved one. Do they want the dog on the bed with them? Do you know that it's okay to get in bed with your loved one at the end of their life? It's actually encouraged. They want pictures around. Do they want flowers? Like, these are all the things that talking about end of life is going to help you to understand what creates a healing environment for your loved one. Reducing fear, pain, and suffering. This goes to a lot of the conversation too about what are you afraid of? Like, what is it about death that scares you? For a lot of people, they don't want to miss out on loved ones, who they're leaving behind, and weddings and anniversaries and birthdays. And it's like, okay, well, how can we bring some peace to that? Well, how about a legacy project? Write letters for all these important birthdays, or create videos for a wedding that might come in the future, or a sweet 16, or, just all the college graduation. Like, how can you find peace within knowing that you're going to leave? Emotional and spiritual support. We've talked about that. Initiating conversations about death. We've talked about that. Demystifying the stages of death and dying so that people understand it's actually better for mom to not have IV fluids at the very end of life, because it will lead to a more peaceful death. Giving fluids at the very end of life can actually cause more discomfort. So helping them to understand things like that. Acknowledging mysteries. So, I'm sure you've heard as a nurse, and, some of your listeners have experienced mom or dad saying, I need to pack. I've got to get going, because they're going on a trip, or they're talking to somebody in the room, or looking or reaching towards someone who nobody else can see. Like, what is that? How do you support that, instead of saying, dad's hallucinating, or, he's over medicated? Like, how can you support those mysteries and unexplained events? Being with intense emotions. We mentioned this before, is holding space for everyone to have all their feelings, because this is an intense time for a family. And many of us don't give ourselves the grace to feel our feelings and to actually release them, to talk about what they're going through, the fear of losing their parent. So just to be able to hold that kind of intense emotion and create that space for someone to have that and be witnessed, like one human being witnessing another human being having grief, or, feeling this intense sadness about the loss of their loved one, can be a gift. Holding others' beliefs. I might feel differently about certain things at the end of life than you do. I'm not going to bring my feelings into this. This is about you and your family. So there's no judgment. There's no criticism. There's just you being, having the opportunity to share freely what you feel without anyone judging that. A steward of conscious death. That pretty much just means being as present as possible during this dying process. And then no one dies alone. Somebody might choose to be by themselves when they die, but there's always going to be, as far as I'm concerned, if you want someone with you at the end of your life, that should be something that's available to you, regardless of whether or not you can afford to hire a death doula. Mm. So those are some of the principles and practices that that are on my priority list.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you for clarifying all those. How closely would you do death doulas work with hospice nurses?
I think, we might, pass in the night, and oftentimes, depending on how long you're staying with a family, that's going to happen. But as far as, actually working together, I think it just happens situationally. I believe I don't have that experience where I am right now. But there are some hospices that have doulas on staff.
That's great. It just makes so much sense to have an extra set of hands and also lens and expertise to be there. And as you mentioned, hospice nurses are just, they're just, there's very little of them, and there's a lot of need for them. So, they're very stretched to the max, and they're doing their best. So to have somebody such as, people in your role to be able to be there in between for the family and the clients, that would be great. Yeah. So I think you brought some, I know you do workshops. I think you brought cards that you want to show, and that opens up a conversation, right, around death and dying.
Yeah, it's really important to me to be a resource in my community. And one of the ways that I do that is by bringing people together at local restaurants, just sitting around, having a cocktail or some appetizers, and initiating conversations about death. This is a non-threatening way of talking about a conversation that a lot of people avoid no matter what. So bringing this into the community, maybe a libation might, help to bring down, their fears. And then I use a tool called the Death Deck. Mm-hmm. And it's just a deck of cards with questions that initiate conversation. So I've got some here that I'll just bring to us, and we can talk about.
Yeah, that'd be
Dan,
great.
if you want to join in. So would there be differences in how your family members would treat your medical condition if you couldn't speak for yourself? And the multiple choice answers are no, I've been very clear with instructions. B, they would argue but ultimately agree. Or C, yes, they struggle with choosing a restaurant. So what would your answer be?
My answer would be, I would say it would be B. I think because even though I've made my wishes clear, I think my husband's emotions and also my children's emotions might get in the way, might cloud their judgment. But I think ultimately they'll, go with what I originally have asked. Yeah.
So as an end-of-life educator, I would encourage you to be very specific and clear. Do you have a healthcare agent?
Mm-hmm, I do.
So that healthcare agent is the person who ultimately should know exactly what your wishes are, because that's the person that you're choosing to communicate with the medical staff. And they're the ones who will say, this is exactly what Debbie told me she wants. And then there's no questions. Hopefully you share that with your family, but then there's no questions. There's no arguing. So that helps to free up the family to just address the feelings, the emotions that are coming up around what you're experiencing. But having a healthcare agent and making sure that that person understands exactly what you want is a gift to the family.
Mm-hmm. Can you just briefly explain to the viewers, real briefly, what a healthcare agent is, just for some people who may not understand?
A healthcare agent is an individual that you choose who will speak for you when you are unable to speak for yourself. And that individual is someone who will speak to the doctors and will make decisions for you. when you're in a position where you can't do that for yourself. And it's somebody that hopefully when you've asked them to be that person for you, you have addressed exactly what your wants are.
Mhm. Yeah.
And there are a lot of resources that help you to do that. There's an organization called Five Wishes. Five Wishes. It doesn't just incorporate the legal part of this, like a healthcare proxy and, your healthcare agent. It goes into the emotional side of that too, and also more specific medical choices, like, do you want a feeding tube? Things like that. So it's five, I think it's Five Wishes, the word spelt out.com. And it's a great tool for end of life planning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Can I pick another card?
Yes, please.
Okay. So here's another one. What's a story or song that you hope is shared at your funeral or celebration of life?
Oh, I was just thinking about that last night, actually. I would love a song called, I think the title is Three Little Birds. Yeah, and that's by
Bob Marley?
Yes. Yes. I would love that to be played. Yeah, I was watching a show last night and that was in one of the segments. And I said, yep, that's one of the songs. Yep.
So something else that I encourage during these conversations is if you're choosing to have, instead of a traditional funeral, that you're going to have something like a life celebration, create your playlist now. What are songs, and ask your loved ones, what song reminds you of me? What if this song came on the radio, what song is it that would make you think of me? And just create your playlist now. Tuck it away somewhere. Another tool that I encourage my clients to use is a in case of death file. I've had clients who create boxes and they get really creative and they decorate them. But in this file, you put, the legal documents, but also this is what I want to wear at my life celebration. This is my signature cocktail that I would like everyone to drink or offer. Have this food, play this song, have these flowers. So you get very specific. For me, I want everybody to wear some shade of purple. It's my color, just purple. I want to see a sea of purple as I look down on my people. So, so again, getting very specific about what you want.
That's great. Yeah, my mother tells me and my sisters, don't wear black. That's too sad. Wear something really colorful. That's what I want you all to wear.
Yeah. Because I think so. My brother died 2 weeks after the pandemic, 2 weeks after the lockdown. So we didn't have, and they're on the West Coast, he and his family. So we didn't have an opportunity for our family to get together immediately. So it was 2 years later that we all finally got out to California, and it was a beautiful celebration of his life. We had pictures, stringing around a looping set of pictures from childhood all the way up to the end of his life. His music, cocktails with different names on them that you look at and go, of course we would have that cocktail because it reminds you of him. But it was a full out celebration of his existence. And it was beautiful compared to how we were feeling, immediately afterwards, and the shock because it was very unexpected and sudden. This was a beautiful way for us to heal and be together.
That's very creative, and it's a nice way to use the energy of grief and love in a positive way. Yeah. That's great.
So here's another question. Which of these phrases do you feel is the worst to say to someone after the death of a loved one? I know just how you feel. They're in a better place now. Everything happens for a reason.
Is there a none of the above?
Nope. Which is the worst? Right? They're all not so great things to say.
Not there, and then they just come so readily sometimes, because you just want to feel like you need to say something, So I would have to say, oi. I think what I have heard myself say, truthfully, just because I've seen how much the person has suffered, is that they are in a better space right now.
And that would be the worst thing to say?
I think that would be the best. So I answered it correctly. So the worst would be, what was the third one?
Everything happens for a reason. And the first was, I know just how you feel.
I think the worst one would be the everything happens for a reason. Yeah. I think that's kind of cold to me. I don't know.
But it's interesting how just like that question in and of itself, when it was asked last week at this event, brought up a bunch of experiences that people have had. And that just adds to the grieving process when, you come across somebody who you think is going to be supportive, and then they say something like that. And it's not malicious. It comes from a place of just not knowing what to say, which in my opinion brings up the importance of these conversations so that you can learn what to say, and put yourself in that person's position. Or, I mean, most of us have had the experience of a loved one dying. And what didn't you want to hear? I mean, I hear most people say, if I hear another person tell me they're sorry for my loss, I'm going to scream. So what's a better way? I'm here for you. I care. Maybe instead of let me know if you need anything, say, I'm going to cook a meal for you. Would you rather it Monday or Tuesday night? I'm going to drop it off. So just the last thing somebody wants to do is start thinking about logistics and the things that need to be done in their life. I'm going to come by and clean your house. You've got somebody close to you, but ways to be helpful and ways to acknowledge the loss so using empathy instead of sympathy.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. At the same time, though, I think it depends on who it is that you're saying it to. If you're saying it to somebody you're close to, or, a colleague's spouse, it all depends on the comfort and what you feel like you can do for that particular. Yeah, but I could see how, for families during the wake or a funeral to constantly all day long, maybe the whole month, hearing I'm sorry. That could be very tiring. But yeah. So it makes people more mindful about, what to say, and, giving them ourselves maybe permission to just not say anything. Maybe just holding hands, or maybe just a sympathetic, a nice, kind.
I'm thinking of you. And sometimes a text is worth so much more than a phone call. Is I'm thinking of you. I hope no need to respond. Just wanted you to know that I'm thinking of you. And then also, I don't know, 2 weeks after the death of a loved one, everybody starts going back to their own life. Things start going back to normal, and the griever is still grieving, and probably in a deeper way now, because things have settled down and they're left with their loss. And it's in those weeks and months afterwards that it is so much more meaningful to reach out, still thinking about you. This must be really difficult. On the first Mother's Day, hey, I know this is the first Mother's Day without your mom, or since your mom died. I'm thinking about you. No need to respond. Just want you to know you're in my heart. Just thoughtful things like that can go a long way.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
One more card?
Yeah.
Wanna try one more? How are we
Yeah.
doing on time? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. So here's one. What scares you the most about dying? A, fear of the unknown. B, the pain of the process. Or C, it happening too soon.
For me, it would be happening too soon. I feel like there's work that I still need to continue to do for others, because that drives me. So I think if I'm taken too soon, then I feel like, oh, I could have done more. There's always more in my mind. There's always more. I'm not really, I think when I think about death, I think about, that's, I don't know. I just feel like no pain. I feel like that's like going for surgery, or anesthesia is given to you, you're sleeping. It's the doctors and the nurses and the techs are doing the work. I'm just there receiving as far as surgeries go. So for death, that doesn't really scare me. Yeah.
So what, and you don't have to answer this if you don't feel comfortable. What are the things that if you knew death was like you had a death date, let's say it's 90 days, what are the things that are most important for you to do? Like, I've got to get this done by my expiration date.
Yeah. Well, I am family oriented, so definitely, I'm going to button down the hatches and just really prioritize, making sure that I see my family, I communicate with them, I talk with them, spend time, family and friends, eating the food that I love to eat, going to places, but really just cherishing my time, even going for walks by myself. I want some quality time for myself as well. And it doesn't have to be like 24/7 immersed in family, but I really want to experience as much of life as I can. Yeah. And you know what, you ask these questions, and I, as a nurse, it's just sometimes conversations like these would kind of happen, especially on a quiet shift, and you have a patients. I've had patients who have waited for a heart transplant, and they would be a long time ago. They'd be in the cardiac unit for weeks and weeks and weeks. And sometimes in a quiet evening shift, there's time to just sit, and conversations like this arise, and it's just such a tender moment. Yeah. Such a tender moment, and it's yeah. So I appreciate you bringing your decks of cards to really open up these conversations, and I know it's going to allow people to think, and also in that thinking, hopefully they'll take actions, on what they could do to kind of help prepare themselves and the people they love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people learn more about you? But before you share that, what's the one or two things that you want people to really take away from during our conversation here? Because I can't believe I always say this, but the hour just flew by, and
it did.
You may appreciate you being here. I truly do. It's just, it brings up so much, emotions, but also a wealth of knowledge and how we could really approach that end of our time. So what's one or two things that you want people to come away with, and how can people learn more about you?
So what you just said, this hour went by so fast. Our lives go by like that. And unfortunately, we don't know when our last day is. So having these conversations, and what I continuously find in doing this work with individuals, is that it enhances their life. It brings technicolor to their world. There's more appreciation for relationships. There's more appreciation for nature. The small stuff kind of falls away when they start considering their mortality. And the things that society might say is most important becomes not important at all. Like it's relationships, it's being aware of the gift that we have on this time, in this time on this earth, and really appreciating our existence. And that continuously is what I hear from the people that I do this work with, is that I have a deeper appreciation. I'm more present in my life and in my relationships, and the small stuff just seems to fall away.
Wonderful. Thank you. And how can people learn more about you?
My website is leavinginlove.com. And that just kind of speaks to my goal. I'm hoping my intention is to help people who I do this work with to get to a place at the end of their life where they're not in fear or regret or anxiety, but they're in this place of feeling grace and contentment, and that they can leave in love, not only with the life that they had, but they were with their relationships with individuals, and also their relationship with themselves, that they have this loving relationship with themselves and they leave in love. So leavinginlove.com.
Appreciate you being on this program and sharing with us what a death doula has to offer for those who are, looking for something such as this to help, with such a difficult time in everybody's lives. So thank you, Amy. And I also want to thank the Quincy Health Department for sponsoring this program. This is Debbie Lynn Toomey, Tufts Medical Center's Injury Prevention Coordinator. I wish you all a great day. Thank you for being on this program. Bye-bye.